Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so thrilled you're joining us today because we're going to fundamentally rethink website infrastructure. For years, we've all relied on tweaking and tuning traditional web servers just to squeeze out a tiny bit more speed. But today, we're asking a much bigger, much bolder question. What happens to your website's performance, stability, and growth when you literally remove that origin server from the equation entirely?
Let me start off by asking you a pretty provocative question. Can software outrun geography? Think about the traditional server model as a grueling cross-country daily commute for your data. Every single time a user clicks a link, your website's files have to physically travel through fiber optic cables, across cities, across oceans, and across whole continents just to reach their screen. It's a massive, exhausting journey. So, can a quick software update or a new line of code magically shrink the Earth? Spoiler alert, it definitely can't.
Just look at the massive discrepancy here. 1800 milliseconds versus 38 milliseconds. This is your time to first byte, and it brilliantly illustrates why geographic distance is a very real physical component of your load time. A traditional server setup might take nearly 2 full seconds just to send the very first piece of data across the globe. But by fundamentally changing the architecture, we drop that to 38 milliseconds. That's literally the difference between a frustrating bounce-inducing wait and an instant load.
Section 1. The physics of speed and the old server model.
Okay, we really need to bust a common myth right off the bat. The idea that caching plugins can somehow fix geography. They can't. Traditional caching still relies on a distant origin server. The second a user logs in, adds an item to a cart, or triggers any dynamic request, your site falls right back to forcing a distant server to build that page from scratch. Static edge computing, on the other hand, means the page is already pre-built and served locally to the user. No falling back to a server on the other side of the planet.
Picture this. A user in Tokyo clicks a link for a site hosted on a server sitting in New York. First, the request physically crosses the ocean. Then, the server has to execute 100% of the PHP processing and run heavy database queries to manually assemble that page from scratch. Now imagine thousands of people clicking at once. That single CPU bottlenecks, making it incredibly vulnerable to traffic spikes. The result? Failing core web vitals and super frustrated visitors. And again, software plugins simply cannot fix this physical structural bottleneck.
Section 2. Welcome to the Edge.
So instead of forcing every single visitor worldwide to travel to one server, platforms like Nimbica copy your pre-built website to over 200 deployment locations globally. It's exactly like having a fully equipped branch office right next door to your customers. Now, if that same user in Tokyo clicks a link, they're served by a data center right there in Tokyo. The distance is completely erased.
Let's clearly define what we're actually talking about here. Edge computing means pre-building your website pages and distributing those static copies to hundreds of localized data centers worldwide. That's how you achieve zero latency delivery. You can see how we're solving a physics problem, the time it takes data to travel, with a geographic solution. We're permanently moving the data to where the users actually are.
Section 3. Enterprise Tech meets WordPress.
For the longest time, this kind of ultra-fast edge architecture was strictly reserved for massive enterprise platforms. But tools like Nimbica act as the bridge, bringing this 16 times faster infrastructure directly to standard WordPress and WooCommerce setups. And honestly, the best part? It transforms your existing site automatically. You don't need to hire a developer, you don't need to write a single line of code, and you definitely don't need to rebuild your theme.
Here's the technical pipeline of how it actually works. Step 1. Your team keeps creating content in WordPress, completely business as usual. Step 2. Nimbica's AI change detection kicks in. When you hit publish, it identifies exactly which pages were affected and incrementally rebuilds only those specific pages in under 30 seconds. And step 3. Global edge distribution. Those fresh, static pages are instantly pushed out to all 200 locations worldwide. You get static speed without ever breaking your dynamic CMS.
Now, you might assume this requires a massively complex setup, but your editorial and marketing teams keep their exact same, familiar editing workflow. The entire connection to this massive global edge network is achieved through a shockingly simple WordPress plugin. You just install it, connect your API key, and the AI takes over all the heavy lifting in the background.
Section 4. Proof in the metrics.
When you strip that origin server entirely out of the delivery path, the results are undeniable.
We're talking flawless 100 out of 100 performance scores on desktop and 97 on mobile with near-zero layout shifting. That means your pages don't visually jump around as they load. Your first contentful paint, which is the exact moment a user actually sees the first text or image appear, drops to mere fractions of a second. This is exactly the kind of technical SEO foundation that directly drives organic growth.
The contrast between these two journeys is absolutely brutal. Traditional WordPress yields a 4.2-second load time, a failing score of 45, and a sluggish 1.8-second wait for the first byte. Contrast that with an Edge-powered site, a 0.6-second load time, a near-perfect 99 score, and a snappy 38-millisecond response. You're looking at an 85% faster overall load time simply by changing the underlying architecture.
So, why does all this matter for your business? Just take this massive success story from CTO David Wilson. He says, handling Black Friday traffic surges used to crash our WordPress origin server. With Nimbica Static Edge, we handled 120,000 concurrent buyers with 100% uptime. This perfectly highlights the ultimate stakes here: invulnerability. When 99% of your traffic is hitting edge nodes instead of stressing out your single database, your e-commerce store becomes virtually crash-proof during your biggest sales events.
Okay, but here's a stat that might actually surprise you about cost reduction. Michael Chen, a managing director at an agency, notes that server hosting costs fell 70%. Client speed tickets dropped to 0. Because you're offloading almost all of your reader traffic directly to the Edge network, your origin WordPress server is doing a fraction of the work. You can literally downgrade your expensive hosting plan while simultaneously making your site exponentially faster across the globe.
So if there's one core takeaway I want you to walk away with today, it's this: stop tweaking software. If you're constantly installing new minification tools, struggling with complex cache-clearing rules, or paying to upgrade your server CPU, you are fighting a losing battle against physical distance. If you want true zero-latency speed, you have to change your infrastructure. You have to embrace the edge.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to ponder. If your website could physically sit right next door to every single customer on Earth, how much faster would your business grow? We're talking lower bounce rates, higher conversions, and zero downtime. The edge computing model isn't just a technical upgrade, it's a massive competitive advantage. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to explore how edge infrastructure can completely transform your own site.